So the recent protests in America for racial justice have prompted many massive corporations to put out statements saying they support the protests, they support racial equality. And it's kind of ironic because a lot of them have very, very sketchy histories on racism. So what we're going to do today in this video is go through the most notable examples of companies trying to dress up that they support racial equality, but in the background either directly endorse racism as part of their platform, or they make money of appealing to racists, or they just have serious racist incidences in their past which they haven't really atoned for. But before I get into all these companies and the controversy, let's just remember, corporations exist to make money. They are never sincere in their, socio-political stances. They're simply pandering to an audience. So if they say they're for racial equality in America, they know that plays well with the market, and simultaneously they will ignore racism, they will ignore controversy when the market in other parts of the world like China don't want it. So John Boyega was part of the Black Lives Matter UK protests, and he gave a speech which prompted a lot of people to give him a lot of praise on social media, including the Star Wars main Twitter account. So Star Wars tweeted, "Lucasfilm stands with John Boyega and his message that now is the time. Black lives have always mattered, black lives have always been important, black lives have always meant something. The evil that is racism must stop. We will commit to being part of the change that is long overdue in the world. John Boyega, you are our hero." Now, Alana Pierce tweeted, "You didn't stand with him when the Force Awakens poster released in China." So in this poster, they minimize Finn. Now, of course, while we often talk about the problems of racism in the US or UK because it's more apparent because of the makeup of these societies being more diverse, in China they obviously have a massive problem with racism, and here it shows Disney directly downplaying Finn's involvement in the film to appeal to the Chinese market. So there was another good point made by Jenny Nicholson, and she tweeted, "I'm glad that Star Wars brand has expressed support of John, especially after his consideration that he was harming his career, but I wish they would demonstrate their support of black voices by hiring them as creative leads on more projects and not sidelining them in their stories." Now, it's pretty true throughout Star Wars, there isn't much black involvement. You know, off the top of my head, John Boyega, Ahmed Best, Samuel Jackson, and a couple others. But if you look at the writing teams, directing teams of things like The Clone Wars, Mandalorian, Rebels, there isn't many black people involved. And indeed, apart from maybe Phil Lamar, I can't actually think of much of black voice talent in those shows either. So I mean, with Disney, you've got to actually act on what you're saying. And again, this plays into what I was saying at the start, that corporations exist to make money. So yeah, in America, in the West, Star Wars will say they support John Boyega, they support racial equality, while at the same time minimizing him on the post of The Force Awakens because they want to appeal to Chinese people, and they're afraid that maybe ingrained prejudices in Chinese society will stop them from seeing the film if they know a black guy will feature prominently. So Patreon is another one, the crowdfunding site. I, have a Patreon myself. And the CEO of Patreon, Jack Conte, said, "We stand with black creators and the entire black community." And he put out a long statement. And what I'm going to do with most of these, I'm not going to read them because they're all just corporate garbage and they're pretty much the same. But you get the gist of them, promising to do better, promising to stand up for racial equality, all this stuff, like what Disney said. But then Maddox Rules tweeted, "This is Jack Conte, CEO of Patreon. He directly profits off white supremacy. He's had at least 3 white nationalists on podcasts funded by his platform since November alone, including a Holocaust denier and a white supremacist, Stephen Molyneux. Patreon CEO allowed one of his creators to use his Patreon funds to give rewards to people who made rape threats against a girl I was dating. I notified them and they did nothing about it." Now, you might say that, Patreon is in a different situation. It is a crowdfunding platform. Maybe you might think, who is the CEO to dictate who can be on the site or not? But, Twitter, as bad as it is for racism and white nationalism, it's not the same as Gab. Like, Gab is a social media where loads of Nazis exist because they basically have no rules. Patreon does have rules, and him putting out this statement while allowing white supremacists to use his platform to make money obviously makes his statement ring completely hollow and shows again he doesn't actually care about equality. So here's a funny one. So Zoom, everyone is using Zoom now, even though it's super sketchy. Zoom put out the black square and said, "We know this post won't fix the issues, but we want to make our stance clear. We are with you." Probably one of the most ironic ones because Nico Grant tweets, "Zoom CEO says he won't encrypt free calls so Zoom can work more with law enforcement. Quote, Free users for sure. We don't want to give them that because we also want to work together with FBI, with local law enforcement in case some people use Zoom for a bad purpose. Now, what is bad in this instance? You know, the police right now are just beating peaceful protesters. They're going into people's homes if they run away from the police, kicking down doors and dragging them out. They're pushing over really vulnerable people. They're shooting a guy with his pregnant wife in a car just because they've gone insane off their power. So Zoom's saying that they're with the protesters, but also they don't want to encrypt their phone calls, which most social media messaging apps do and most video calls do, because they want to work with the FBI and local law enforcement. How the hell are they with you? Again, hollow statement, but this one's even more funny because they literally just go back on it straight away. Now, personally, I have a big opinion on the next one. It is the developers of Modern Warfare, the current one, but also Modern Warfare's 1, 2, and 3, and they put out a statement announcing they're going to clamp down on racism that is rife, we all know that, within the Modern Warfare community. In a statement Infinity Ward put out on their Twitter, they said, "There is no place for racist content in our game. This is an effort we began with at launch, and we need to do a better job," at least they're admitting that. "We're issuing thousands of daily bans of racist and hate-oriented names, but we know we have to do more, and we are." So they're just listing all the measures where they're going to put different filters in, so you can't write racist messages, you can't add racist usernames. So they said, "We apologise to our players. This is our commitment to you, our fans. Thank you." But again, why does it take massive protests for racial equality across America to make you implement these changes? Why have you waited? You know, if you're from, I guess, the old Xbox 360, Xbox Live days, you'll remember search and destroy lobbies in Modern Warfare 1 and Modern Warfare 2. The, you know, racism you would hear on that would be some of the worst stuff you could ever hear. And, you know, I've talked about in the past how I think football stadiums in the UK and online gaming communities had the same sort of problem where they're havens for young men to say whatever they want, and this is how you get these really racist elements developing within them. So another big one is Reddit. Reddit, the home of the Donald. Reddit, the home of numerous awful subreddits, whether that's Watch People Die, but also a haven for white nationalists. Let's not forget, the Charlottesville was actually planned on the Donald, and the Donald is still up to this day. It's just been quarantined, but that only happened, I think, a year ago, probably less. And to show that they're being so great, they also quarantined Chapo Trap House because, of course, that's the exact same thing as the Donald. So Reddit changed the icon to a black snoo and wrote on Twitter, "As Snoos, we do not tolerate hate, racism and violence, and while we have work to do to fight these on our platform, our values are clear." A letter from CEO Steve Huffman. Again, I'm not going to read it, it's pretty much the same stuff as everything else you've seen. But again, people bring in the receipts. So one Twitter user, HasRock36, says, "Sure," and then quotes an article from The Guardian that says, "Open racism and slurs are fine to post on Reddit," says CEO. Steve Huffman says communities can set their own guidelines, but racism is permitted on wider site as people have different beliefs. Sleeping Giants also responded saying, "Are you kidding with this? All you have done is tolerate hate, racism and violence on your platform. You don't get to put this out after years of providing a platform for violent Nazis and white supremacists. They're on there right now. As you tweet this, you hypocrites." So again, I've had my own experience on Reddit, and the difference of Reddit is every little community is moderated by users, but also on Reddit, most of the prominent subreddits are all moderated by the same handful of people. So they have disproportionate power. And of course, now Reddit has ads running. They want as much users as possible. And the Donald is a very, very active, or at least was when it was public, subreddit. So he's profiting off this white supremacy. And the stuff you would see on there, I've made a video in the past, I'll link it in the description, where I just scroll through and read all the comments, which are so racist and insane. And that stayed up for ages, even after Charlottesville. So again, like all the other companies, the CEO of Reddit doesn't care. Reddit doesn't care as an entity because it's making money off this. They're only saying it to save face, and they feel like they have to say it in the context because only 2 years ago he was saying racism on the platform is fine. So going over the Call of Duty theme a bit more, Activision Blizzard, who own Call of Duty, among other things, they tweeted out, "Today and always we support all those who stand against racism and inequality. There is no place in our society or any society, Black Lives Matter." Now, Activision are infamous for clamping down on esports players who voiced their support for the Hong Kong protests. Remember, I think it was Blitzchung, he said about Free Hong Kong during a live stream broadcast of an esport, and not only did Activision ban him for a year, they also banned the 2 sportscasters. Now, of course, we can remember Activision's bullshit fake apology where it's basically a non-apology. And to say now that you know, they support fights against inequality, but they, you know, silence anyone who spoke up for the Hong Kong protesters is just so ironic. And the Atman tweeted out an article which said, Activision Blizzard CEO, our gaming platform isn't the place for political views. Yeah, and he said basically it's not the place for politics. But now apparently it is. Are you seeing a pattern? In Western countries, corporations will pretend to be woke, pretend to support fights against equality, because they know that plays to the market. They know Western countries care about these things more. Where in China, where the nationalism is so strong in the country, where most of Chinese people in communist China support Hong Kong becoming a part of China again, banning anyone who voices support for the protesters makes business sense because they can make as much money as possible and they can expand throughout that market. And of course, even more so than the American market, the Chinese government obviously has a big say on who can do business in that country. You don't want to annoy them if you want to do business in one of the largest growing markets for video games. But again, it's just total hypocrisy on all accounts, whether that is Star Wars and China or whether that is Activision Blizzard in China. Like I've been saying throughout the whole video, it's an opportunity for these companies to just use the current climate as a PR exercise, to use it to make themselves appear better, because most companies are inherently exploitative. A lot of companies are inherently racist because they exist in a racist capitalist system. And you can make the general argument, corporations exist to make money. That is it. They don't have feelings. They're not people, despite what the US would say. So when they see certain markets, they change their strategy. It's like most companies aren't waving the LGBT flag in Arab countries where being gay is illegal, are they? Activision Russia are probably not putting out Black Lives Matter things in their advertisements, because they know the market won't like it. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Leave the worst examples you can think of. I might do a follow-up to this with the celebrities who've had the worst takes. Let me know if you want to see that. Please like the video, maybe subscribe. Follow me on social media if you're on Twitter, that is @TheCavaNackle. That is my main one. Also Facebook and Instagram if you're on those as well. Please check out my Reddit, that is another really big one for me. So r/TheCavaNackle for my subreddit, u/TommyCahill1995 for my personal Reddit. My Patreon is in the description, check that out if you want, and my WordPress is also in there. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.